I'm going to start just a couple minutes early because we have a little bit of news we want to give everyone as they're coming in. So I want to first start by saying good evening and welcome to our audience here in person and on YouTube. We really appreciate the work that our friends of the Missouri State Archives do with these Thursday evening speaker series. My name is John Dugan. I serve as the Director of Record Services and State Archivist for the Secretary of State's office. And like I said, I want to start with a little bit of news. I have never been, and I'm always proud of the archivists we have here, but I've never been so proud of my coworkers as I have this week. They'll have some slides here. On Monday morning, we came in to find a major water leak in our building. It was a heating system on the third floor of the Record Center, and initially they thought, not a big deal. Like, it's on the concrete. It's not really a big deal. Unfortunately, when we got down to the first floor, it did have a lot of impact on some of the records in the archive stacks. The record series included some records from the Adjutant General's Office, the State Auditor, DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and a few from our own office in the Secretary of State's office. I want to publicly thank our staff for the great job they have done, led by our conservation team in the recovery we have. Of the 538 boxes and 346 books that were pulled on Monday, no records have been lost, and many of them were saturated. As of today, they are all stabilized. We have 80 boxes and 30 books in our blast freezer. We bought that a couple years ago, and this one event has really justified its existence, so we're thrilled to have it. Unfortunately, but we're thrilled to have it. So it will probably still take us a few months to work through those, a few boxes and a few books at a time. Those were the worst records that we have. I'm not even sure on the screen here, but some of those pictures showed, I think, me tilting a box with water just pouring out the corner of the box. Another one as we were unloading the boxes, the young lady there with the big smile on her face. They'd just literally given her second shower of the day. She was just completely covered with water. But through this all, very difficult for the staff. They've done a great job. This incident shows how important records management is, how important that our trained staff, our well-trained staff are. And we're very lucky to have the great staff we have here at the Archives. It also shows the importance of our Friends Group. We're hoping to not have to ask the Friends Group for any support with this emergency, but they're here for us for programs like this, and if we need them in an emergency, they're here to help us as well. So I was up here mainly just to tell you about that. We've not really been super publicizing this because we've been busy working on getting everything stabilized, but I wanted to tell you all about that before we start our program this evening. So now, Vicki, if you'll come up and introduce our speakers and the announcements.
I am Vicki Myers, and I'm president of the Friends of the Missouri State Archives, and we are responsible for these Thursday night programs. I also want to let you know that from the funds and the membership that we get, we provide scholarships also annually. As an aside, I want to let you know that I am wearing pink tonight because I am an member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and we were founded in 1908, and we are the oldest black sorority internationally. We were founded at Howard, and the undergraduate chapter here was started in 1930 at Lincoln, and the graduate chapter in 1940. So just want to let you know that. We invite you to join us here at the Missouri State Archives for an eventful week in February. On February the 17th at 6 p.m., the Archives is hosting a reception for the American Revolution Experience, a traveling exhibit created by the American Battlefield Trust. This event is co-sponsored by the Friends with the sons and daughters of the American Revolution members of the SAR and will present on that 1780 Battle of St. Louis, and light refreshments will be served. The exhibit will be on display at the archives from February the 17th through March the 5th. Then join the Friends for the Thursday evening speaker series on February the 19th at 7 p.m. G. Faye Dant will present on her book, Hannibal's Invisibles. Dant, a Hannibal resident and the executive director of Jim's Journey, the Huck Finn Freedom Center, tells the incredible story of the Black community in this small Missouri town, giving voice to a history that has been marginalized far too long. Here are accounts from those who survived enslavement, faced racism after emancipation, endured Jim Crow, and contributed to the triumphs of the civil rights movement. These are the stories of Black doctors, entrepreneurs, and teachers who helped uplift the community, and in remembrance of the countless individuals who gave richness and meaning to Hannibal's everyday life. Today we showcase Michelle Brooks. Michelle is a former reporter for the News Tribune, where she worked for more than 17 years and won more than 70 awards for her writing. Since then, Michelle has joined our ranks here at the Missouri State Archives, but in her free time, she still writes a monthly local history column on behalf of the historic city of Jefferson, which runs in the News Tribune. In addition to the book she will be discussing this evening, Michelle has also penned the Jefferson City Civil Pilots, from Lincoln University to Tuskegee Airmen, and more. Her newest book, First to Freedom, Cole County, United States Colored Troops, will be released February the 7th. Please join me in welcoming Michelle Brooks to the Missouri State Archives.
Well, thank you guys for coming out tonight. I want to reiterate what John said. I work with some pretty great people who are pretty talented and pretty dedicated to their jobs. It's really great when you work at a place where people are passionate about what they do, but also passionate about each other. So it's been really cool to kind of bond and get to know coworkers in a stressful environment. It's a little bit different, and I've really enjoyed it. Working at the newspaper, obviously I was involved in several stressful situations over the years. But this was a really fun, can I say fun, John? Okay. It was a very interesting time, yes. So I'm appreciative of being part of the archives here and getting to experience this and observe and be part of taking care of these records for our state. Well, can you believe, I've got a lot of familiar faces. This is book number 8 for me, and this has only been 4 years. So yeah, it kind of threw me back the other day when I was thinking about it. But I hope you guys are enjoying this journey with me. I'm really enjoying delving into this history and finding those lesser known stories and those things that make you go, huh, that's pretty interesting. For those of you who are familiar with the works that I've done so far, a lot of them have been more serious. I've had more of a burden to tell the story. You know, I'm responsible for getting this story out there on paper. This is fun. This is meant to be fun. So I hope you enjoy the next 40 minutes or so. If you take a book home with you, I hope you enjoy that as well. But that was my intent, was to just find some fun stuff about Jefferson City and share that with you. This book's origin comes from the Hidden History of Jefferson City book that I did. Originally, it was just going to be a section in there. As I went along researching, it was pretty evident early on there was not going to be enough room for me to tell the rest of the hidden history if I was going to tell the story of the early hotels. So I just set it aside and I said, well, sometime down the road, we'll retell this story, we'll figure it out. So that's where we are. Unfortunately, I did, again, editors are the worst. They tell you you have to stay within this parameters. You can only have this many pages. So unfortunately, I wanted to do the first 100 years of hotels, which would have taken us from the Rising Sun Hotel in 1826 through to the Missouri Hotel that's underneath the Baptist Building in 1925. But I only made it to 1900, so we're only going to talk about hotels that existed up to 1900. So if anyone out there is a real hotel fan, you are welcome to pick up where I left off. So the archives obviously has been a really good resource for photos, and if anyone is going to take me up on that, we have some really cool photos of motor inns. So you're on your way if you start that project. So one of my favorite projects in that hidden history book was this section where I highlighted the original 30 families in town. It was something that I always wanted to do. I wanted to meet these pioneers to find out where they came from and why were they here in 1825. And so what I found were they were people just like us, entrepreneurs, skilled laborers, politicians and lawyers, teachers, and their wives, their children, and their enslaved people. History books will like to point out that when the first General Assembly met in Jefferson City in November of 1826, there were 30 men. True. But there were, in fact, more like 120 people once you count all of the people who were here. Nevertheless, that number more than doubled when those legislators and their entourages arrived for that General Assembly. Their travel by horseback, pirogue, flatboat, or other means likely took days, so they weren't going to go home before the end of the session. So where did they stay? John Gordon built the Rising Sun Hotel that was across Madison Street from that first State House. A few other saloon keepers offered rooms and tents. More families opened their homes to these elected strangers, but most probably, many of them just pitched their own tent where they could find open ground. This phenomenon continued every 2 years. Men of high standing arriving at the state's capital city expecting top accommodations and finding a true frontier town of modest means. Especially those traveling from the more modern and populated area around St. Louis, they pushed quickly for the capital removal. This is a recurring theme for the next 90 years. The men and women who built, owned, and managed the hotels played a pivotal role each time the idea of moving the seat of government came up. So many names cycled through the early hotel business here. Newspapers chronicled the new owners or managers and their efforts to revitalize a hotel for the incoming General Assembly, and then often the very next year you would find that same name listed in the bankruptcy. For 4 months, their rooms were filled and their kitchens busy, and then the next 20 months were slow, with just a few steamboat visitors passing through or professionals just arriving. It was not a lucrative business early on. It took men and women with another source of revenue or with strong charisma. Few persevered over the long term. So, in this book, I tried to be as comprehensive as possible, but as Gary Elliott pointed out, I might have missed something that he found, so I do hope that you look at other sources if you really get into the hotels, because there's always more to be found. Many of you that are researchers know that just as soon as you quit and you put it together, you find a new source. But I did try to be as comprehensive as possible to get a real sense of what was going on in that early Jefferson City community. What was the most difficult about this project was keeping track of the changing names, the property owners, the hotel managers, and the properties. So the best example of this problem was the building that we historically remember today as the City Hotel. It was, in fact, the second City Hotel. But before that, this building was the Newman Hotel, the National Hotel, the Marshall Hotel, the Paulsell House, and Newman City Hotel. Now, to be clear, we're talking about that northwest corner of Madison and High Street where Central Bank is today. So Thomas and Philip Miller built on this corner a business house and a home about 1836, but by 1840, they were selling it off to pay their debts. They eventually wound up in prison to pay off those debts in bankruptcy. Recurrent theme. So Michael Newman moved his National Hotel into the corner property in 1840. It had been a brick building in the middle of the block on High Street, and that was where the stagecoach met. But then when Michael Newman moved into the corner property, he moved the name with it. And so the corner property became the National Hotel. Let me tell you, that was a lot of hard work to try and figure out all these name changes. So Michael's son, Hardin, was leasing the National Hotel in 1844. U.S. Senator Thomas Hart Benton and 20 legislators stayed here during the General Assembly. Now, if you look at this building, this is from 1859. That does not look like it would hold 20 dignitaries and then some, but apparently it did. So lots of surprises in here. Michael Newman's sister, Catherine, had married Henry Paulsell before the families moved west from Virginia. The Miller brothers, if you remember, sued Newman and Paulsell, who also lost everything. So in 1846, John Curry takes over the corner, and he renames it the Marshall House. Tailor T.J. Wilburn moves his tailor shop into the hotel, and then 2 years later, he becomes the manager of the hotel when Henry Paulsell returns and renames the hotel the Paulsell House. Interesting about Mr. Wilburn, his wife was the daughter of John Gordon, who opened the Rising Sun Hotel, so lots of intermarrying. The Jefferson Inquirer said Mr. Wilburn was an attentive and accommodating landlord and that she could not be surpassed as a landlady. When Paulsell died in the 1849 cholera epidemic, Hardin Newman returned to Jefferson City from St. Louis, renaming the hotel as the Newman City Hotel. His mother, Rebecca, was a noted hostess for many years, even after his father died. During the Civil War, the City Hotel was a central location. It is likely that the telegraph office was housed here, and local lore says in August of 1861, a young Ulysses Grant was an officer and spent 11 days here. In 1862, Hardin Newman was arrested for giving aid and comfort to the enemy, and shortly afterward moved back to St. Louis. A new era for the City Hotel began in 1867 under the ownership of Fred Knopp. Is Ruthie Kaplinger here? Did she sneak in? All right. So I have benefited from several local people who were either related to or had information about several of these hotel owners and operators. Ruthie's one of them. Mr. Knopp is her 3 times great-grandfather. So unlike the previous owners hailing from Virginia, Mr. Knopp was a carriage maker who had immigrated from Prussia. He had operated a saloon and boarding house near the train depot during the war. Knopp's first order of business after buying the City Hotel was to add a 3rd floor to the hotel, which you can see by comparing these 2 images. Civil War prisoner of war John Kaiser became manager in 1871. In 1878, Mr. Knopp bought the building next door on Madison Street, adding even more rooms and refurnishing all of the rooms with walnut furniture made right here in Jefferson City with marble tops. The dining room was moved into the basement next to the kitchen and operated by prominent caterer Howard Barnes. Barnes was enslaved by the Boggs family from Howard County, and he was the cook when they went on the 1849 gold rush. That allowed him to earn enough to buy his own freedom and that of his wife and mother. They moved to Jefferson City before the Civil War, where Barnes became one of the wealthiest and influential black men in the post-Civil War Jefferson City. Personally, Howard Barnes is probably my favorite historic figure in Jefferson City. So Fred Knopp served several terms on the Board of Aldermen and 25 years on the school board. In 1877, he built a lovely Italianate-style home on the southeast corner of Adams and Capitol, which had the first indoor plumbing in town. His home became KWAS Radio Studios, but today it is an extra parking for the Missouri River Regional Library. His daughter, Mary, was a longtime hostess at the hotel, and her sister, Frida, was one of the first local librarians. In 1884, after 13 years, John Kaiser left as manager to become owner and manager of the Hotel Madison just down the street. Knopp then made new updates to his city hotel to keep up. In 1885, Knopp bought the Scovern Grocery Building adjacent on Madison Street. The 3rd floor had been a roller skating rink. I had not thought about a roller skating rink in the 1880s, but alas, they made them into guest rooms. In 1893, Ben Veith and Chris Miller bought the property from Knopp, and in 1896, Miller bought out Veith. Miller had been a bartender at the Monroe House. Then he and Veith bought a saloon in 1890. After selling the City Hotel in 1902, Miller returned to saloon keeping. The City Hotel had 45 rooms when the Central Missouri Trust Company bought the property for about $1.3 million in 2025 dollars. The 80-year-old building was raised in 1916. So the first City Hotel opened about 1834 on a long-gone hill at the 111 West High Street. It was the second hotel in town, operated about 20 years, and it was the gathering spot in the early small town for about a population of 1,000. I believe that this photo, where you see Merchants Bank Building and Neef Terrace, and then the back up there is an older building. It looks like it was built onto. I believe that that could be the original City Hotel, because after it was the City Hotel, it became a school, it became a residence, and then it went back into use as a hotel. And I think the Neef family did that. So I can't prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, but that's what I think. So as you can see here, several hotels were established in the decades before the railroad arrived. One of my disappointments was not finding more out about the White House, Gary. Best I could find out, it was on Main Street, today's Capitol Avenue, quote, in front of the Capitol and Lower Steamboat Landing, end quote. Before it was the White House, it was Ramsey's Tavern. Like many of the early founders of the city, the Ramseys came from Callaway County. Harrison Ray converted the brick building into a hotel in 1838. And like many of our early hoteliers, Ray worked at the first City Hotel before opening his own venture. An incendiary device burned the White House down in 1842, but it was rebuilt by George Coulter and was considered large for its time. However, Mr. Coulter was among the many who did file for bankruptcy. The McCarty House was established by the city's first liveryman. The Missouri House opened at the city's wharf. The National Hotel was the stagecoach stop. The Ferguson House catered to the rural traveler. Then, the Virginia House introduced a higher level of sophistication, and the Jefferson House was known for its romantic Southern charms. Burr McCarty arrived in 1836, a horsemaster from Virginia. He built the city's first livery. When Mayor Thomas Lawson Price got the first mail contract, McCarty drove the first mail wagons from St. Louis. Congenial and generous, McCarty often invited travelers to stay at his house on Van Buren Street, which was renamed McCarty Street in 1854. Not long after, they built an addition onto their house that would become the McCarty House. It was known for its Southern hospitality, and that included the cooking. Cassie Crump was in charge of the kitchen from 1837 to 1876. Cassie was enslaved by Alzira McCarty, who came from Virginia. Cassie's art of cooking gained a statewide reputation. Familiar Virginia comforts included biscuits for breakfast and cornbread for dinner. Cassie's apprentice, Mary Stokes, continued the old-fashioned traditions until the hotel closed in 1906. Stokes' son, Robert, was a world traveler before returning to Jefferson City and operating the Silver Moon Hotel at 209 Monroe Street. Nearly every governor, judge, or other important official from across the state stayed at the McCarty House, or at least debated in the notable parlor. The original mantel and fireplace remained for the building's entire 70 years. While other hotels continually updated, the 20 rooms with downy feather beds remained the same, even when daughter Ella took control in 1890. She had the same knack for hospitality and benefited from Mary Stokes' work in the kitchen. In her eulogy, Congressman John Phillips said of Ella, "Although misfortunes at times seemed to be enamored of her parts, although burdens and struggles accumulated as the seasons came and went, she never failed to rise to the emergent occasion. With unyielding fortitude, wise discretion, and a brave heart, she seemed to possess the alchemy of transmuting disasters into good fortune." The McCarty House stood until 1965 and is now the site of Legends Bank. Jefferson City incorporated in 1839 with Thomas Lawson Price, by far the wealthiest man in town, as the mayor. 2 years later, he built the most impressive house in town on the corner where the Missouri Supreme Court is today. 7 years after that, Price built the Virginia House with convict labor at the northwest corner of Jefferson and High Streets. The large brick structure had 24 large, well-finished rooms. The Price heirs sold the property to Joseph Hugel in 1884. Joseph Hugel immigrated with his family as a child. Then he left his father's Cole County farm to become foreman at the MSP's harness factory, and then he was a bartender. In the early 1870s, he partnered to form the Pacific Flour Mill across from the Dooley Mill. He was a devoted member of the St. Peter Catholic Church and the Knights of Columbus, served as a city alderman. He had been managing the Nichols boarding house when in 1874 he began managing the Virginia, and in 1884 he bought it. And then in 1913, Hugel bought the old Nichols house where he had worked previously. Mrs. Hugel died in 1914, and then after a series of business trips to Kansas City in 1915, Mr. Hugel telegrammed his adult children to say that he had married Mary Walter. The new Mrs. Hugel had operated an orphanage with her sister in Kansas City for 13 years. She was said to have a winning personality and a fine presence. She quickly gained a reputation for extraordinary kindness, like organizing Christmas parties for less fortunate children or investing in the local blind school. In 1917, the newlyweds bought the first Packard in town, and Mrs. Hugel was the driver. In 1918, they added an indoor garden and dance floor to the basement of the hotel. In 1919, they offered the city's first cafeteria. In 1924, Mr. Hugel had been in hotels for 50 years. He was featured in multiple national trade magazines. But by this time, Mrs. Hugel had taken over the primary management of the hotel, with her emphasis being the food and the dining experience. During the Capitol Dedication Day in October 1924, she served 1,000 chickens from her own farm. Her farm was over by where Memorial Park is today. So growing up on a Wisconsin farm, she knew how to run a tractor and tend to her orchard and garden to supply her own kitchens. Joseph died in 1926, never realizing his true dream of opening a 250-room hotel. Despite Mrs. Hugel's success in bringing the operation out of debt and gaining regional notoriety as a woman in a man's world, she lost the hotel in a lawsuit with the Hugel children. Kansas Cityans took ownership, planning to replace it with a modern structure. But as early as 1935, the state had its eye on that corner. The doors closed in 1966, and talk recirculated of a modern high-rise hotel going in there. But the state still wanted that corner land to complete its open-air concept, and it paid the equivalent of $3 million in 2025 for it. The Central Hotel came down in 1969. Now, I think some of you might have been in the Central Hotel, maybe played pool in the Central Hotel. Anybody? Yeah, okay. All right, there we go. That's good. So travelers generally relied on saloons or their hotels or boarding houses for their meals. Several hotels in the first 100 years had notable caterers in their kitchens, like Howard Barnes. William Mousehund was the bartender known for his good meals when he added the Monroe House to his saloon and then a restaurant to his hotel. The Lansdown boarding house, before emancipation, took advantage of Caroline, who they enslaved. It was said lines would form to take a seat at their dining table for one of her meals. One of the curiosities of the time was oyster saloons. Jefferson City had several in the mid-19th century. Herman Petchow leased the Wagner Hotel from Paulus Wagner. Here he opened the oyster saloon and restaurant by 1859. Although interrupted by the Civil War, Petchow reopened the Jefferson City Oyster Depot with a ladies' ice cream saloon next door after the war. The newspaper called him a perfect connoisseur of oysters, but maybe not of business. He sold to pay his debts in 1867. So the oyster craze was not limited to the capital city, but was throughout the Midwest. This is before insulated railroad boxcars. Oysters were captured in blocks of ice and insulated with straw. The earliest Jefferson City mention is 1851 at Henry Cordell's saloon at the Landing, and the Virginia House soon followed. The Inquirer said, quote, "It is quite a treat in our little city to enjoy the taste of good fresh oysters," end quote. Charles Eckler served them at his Veranda Saloon, and the Capitol Oyster Saloon opened about 1855 at the corner of High and Jefferson. Dedicated oyster saloons faded after the Civil War, but they were still a mainstay of restaurant menus well into the 20th century. Did someone ask where the Wagner House was? That should be on the north side of the 100 block of West High Street. So after the railroad arrived, a different caliber of hotel emerged. As you can see, there were new places opening for the traveler to the capital city. The original Missouri Pacific Depot was at the end of Adams Street, so not surprising, hotels were opening up across Water Street. Among them was the American House, opened by John Bower about 1855. Unlike the Main Street and High Street establishments trying to attract the politicians, Bower's Hotel was popular with simple travelers and railroad employees. In 1872, two of those employees, who were also best friends, escalated an accusation of cheating into a knife fight, which left one of them dead. In 1874, a couple of overnight guests became victims of murder as they boarded their getaway train. A woman left her husband in St. Louis to meet another man in Jefferson City to make a new life in Kansas City, but the jilted husband tracked them down. The husband missed 2 shots fired at the man, but his aim was true at his wife after she jumped from the train car. He then turned the pistol on himself. These hotels down by the depot stood well into the 20th century, as many of you probably remember. Hotels also served as de facto hospitals for visitors. For example, Leaper Hale was shot in June 1866, the day General Frank Blair spoke in Jefferson City, stumping for President Andrew Johnson. A row occurred at a local grog shop, resulting in 3 men being shot. Police were prevented from making an arrest by the other men in the saloon, and the mayor refused to close the business. 1 man died immediately, and Leaper Hale's father recovered. Hale was treated for his wounds for a month at the Virginia House before he died. During the Civil War, several hotels were used as temporary hospitals, particularly in the fall of 1864 following Price's raid. And if you look at the Ransom House number 13, I am pretty sure that that is the hotel that the Union Army used as its permanent hospital during the Civil War. With the railroad's arrival in 1856, the number of visitors drastically increased. The 47-room Tennessee House went up in 1857 on the south side of East High Street at 114. That would be next door to today's Cottonstone Gallery. The L-shaped building featured a parlor for the ladies, a bar room, a dining room, and a 60-feet-long reception hall. Just 7 years later, during the Civil War, another addition to the hotel accommodated 100 guests. Doctor and druggist Tennessee Matthews also built the city drugstore next door, where he continued his practice and left the hospital operations to others. He had been in town since 1844. He eventually served as Justice of the Peace, a city alderman, mayor, prison doctor, and president of the fire company. Now, there's a bit of a love story here. Late in life, he took a 3rd wife. Emma Colgan was the widow of Alfred Sanford. Sanford was a War of 1812 veteran and 38 years older than Emma. Left a widow at 43, Emma took up the hospitality business, operating the Capitol House and the American House, then the Ladies and Gents Restaurant and Day Board, where she was arrested at one point for keeping a bawdy house. Emma also was the longtime matron at the Missouri State Penitentiary. In 1875, she leased the Tennessee House. Emma and Tennessee were married in 1884. He was 77, she was 64, and they had 3 years together. The Tennessee House was renamed the Metropolitan House and then demolished in 1899. It was replaced by the Porth Jewelry Store, later Meyerhart's menswear, today called the Garden Gate Building. Today, elected officials rent apartments or even houses in Jefferson City during their terms. For the first century, boarding houses were often a preferred option from staying at a legitimate hotel or sleeping in a tent. Perhaps the first to make a commercial venture of it was William Ferguson, who opened the Rural Choice Boarding House before the 1844 session. He chose the southeast corner of Broadway and High Streets, where the Broadway office building is today. In 1859, he replaced it with a brick building and called it the Ferguson House. Later, the Indiana House, it was claimed by fire in 1874. One of the longest-lasting boarding houses was the Lusk-Nichols House. Pennsylvania-born newspaperman William Lusk invited legislators and other dignitaries to stay at his home. By the 1844 session, his wife Mary was serving 13 legislators in their home, a few doors down from the Virginia House. That same year, Lusk died, so his son took over the Jefferson Inquirer, and his wife converted their home into a real boarding house. She was so successful that she built a second one next door. Samuel Nichols took over in 1874 and renamed it the Nichols House. Now, probably the most notable event here would be Nichols' arrest in the fall of 1876. W.H.R. Agee, an African-American delegate from Daviess County to the Republican Convention in Jefferson City, was denied accommodations. Nichols was charged with violating the 1875 Civil Rights Act. Eventually, his case was combined with 4 other cases and heard by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1883. One case involved theatergoers in California and another railcar seating in Tennessee. The Supreme Court's ruling was 8-1 that the 14th Amendment did not allow Congress to dictate how private individuals run their business. The Lusk-Nichols House survived until 1913. If you guys remember the Central Hotel and Mr. Hugel, this is his property where he got started, and then he bought it, and then he tore it down. So, only a few of our earliest hotels still stand, most notably what we today call the Loman's Landing. It was built about 1836 and was originally called the Missouri House. If you've not been there, the General Store Museum on the lowest level is really cool. You should really go see it. They will be celebrating an anniversary this year, but they're also getting a facelift. Across Jefferson Street is what we refer to today as the Union Hotel. It's also owned by the Missouri State Parks and also slated for full renovations. Charles Mouse built this hotel and reused the name Missouri House after the names had changed on the other side. After serving 3 years in the Missouri State Militia during the war, he renamed it the Union Hotel. By the turn of the century, many of the first hotels were either repurposed or replaced. While the hotels uptown focused on the legislators and railroad visitors, the South Side welcomed a different clientele. Now, these didn't fit on my map, but one of the anchors of the South Side was the Farmers Home Hotel at the southeast corner of Jefferson and Dunklin, which is still there today. A couple of doors east of that is the Niehorn House, or the Bassman Apartments. The Niehorn House was built in 1892 by a widowed immigrant farmer who moved to town, John Niehorn. You might notice different spellings for the surname. The family spelling is, okay. The Schmetzlers are here, right? Wave at me. Yeah, okay. The family spelling is Nieghorn, but the sign painter in 1892 ran out of room, so he dropped the G. And then the State Highway Department swapped the E for an I. Yep. All right. Doris is nodding at me. We got that one right. So the Schmetzlers are also a wealth of information. They really helped me out a lot with this book, so thank you guys very much. The Niehorn House had an unfair share of death in its short time. That included Mr. Niehorn. For rural visitors, the new gas lighting technology could prove fatal. Instead of blowing out the flame, as with a candle, gas technology required the gas to be turned off. Too many visitors forgot the instructions and left the gas on with no flame to consume it, resulting in asphyxiation. In 1899, the hotel outhouse was the scene of a mysterious death. It turns out Morphine May had overdosed a traveler in an attempt to rob him. She was sent to the MSP. In 1903, the name was changed to the South Side Hotel. The space below became a secondhand store, a butcher shop, a bowling alley, and a gymnasium. In 1923, it closed as a hotel and became the Bassman Apartments. I believe we had Bassman Apartment descendants. Yes. So thank you for being here. So one of the richest places in Jefferson City, as far as history goes, is the southwest corner of Madison and Capitol. The Governor's State Office building stands there today, converted from the Hotel Governor. The Hotel Governor was built here on the ruins of the Hotel Madison after a fire. The Hotel Madison was an expanded and updated Madison House. The Madison House was built on the ruins of the Schmidt House after a fire. The Schmidt House was built on the ruins of the first police constable's home. Can you guess? After a fire. So in 1869, Frank Schmidt bought this corner, and then he built an imposing structure with 85 rooms and the most modern conveniences, including a 60-feet square billiard hall and the city's first concert hall. It cost the equivalent of $1.5 million in 2025 dollars. The Schmidt House bar room immediately became the gathering place for politicians, lobbyists, and other influencers of the era. The corruption of St. Louis elected officials reached Jefferson City January 27, 1870, when Captain Edward Augustine confronted Joseph Pulitzer. The captain had been treated generously with offices and contracts from the St. Louis County Court. The young Pulitzer was a new state representative and had proposed legislation for reform. So in the bar room, the captain accused Pulitzer of printing lies in the Westlicka Post, for which he was still a correspondent while also being a representative. Pulitzer walked out, retrieved a 4-barreled Sharps pistol from his rooming house, and returned to the Schmidt House bar room, where the captain called him a puppy, and Pulitzer accused the captain of lying. When the captain abandoned words and approached him, Pulitzer shot him twice. He shot twice. He shot twice. He hit the floor once and hit the captain's knee the other time. Neither of those being fatal, he was only fined $5 for breach of the peace. 2 years later, the Schmidt House burned. William Curry and Oscar Birch rebuilt the Madison House, and they hired William McCarty to manage it. Oh, by the way, Mr. Schmidt was also mayor at the time that his hotel burned. And so 9 months later, he greeted the Grand Duke Alexis, who was traveling through on his fancy train car headed to a buffalo hunt led by Buffalo Bill Cody. And they held a reception in the new Madison House. I could just see him biting his lip, thinking if that fire hadn't happened, he would have been greeting him in his own parlor. So John Kaiser took over the lease in 1878. He was also the leaseholder of the City Hotel. I believe that it was here the outlaw Frank James stayed the night after he surrendered to Governor Crittenden in October of 1882. That evening, nearly 500 people greeted him in his hotel room, including the governor and his wife. The 5-year-old Madison House had 40 apartments and suites, a dining room that seated 500, a bar, a saloon, and a meeting hall. When the hotel was sold at auction in 1883, Kaiser bought it. Then he gave it such a renovation that he restyled it as the Hotel Madison. Now I'm going to tell you something that's not in the book. And if you were here a couple of years ago when I talked about my book, Murder and Mayhem, you might have heard this story. It's not in that book either. Poor Anna Weiss, she was the daughter of a local stonemason. She began working at the Madison House as a young girl and eventually became the head chambermaid. She asked for a leave of absence in June of 1889 to visit her sister in St. Louis, but she never returned. Wearing a neat dress and trim black hat with her umbrella engraved with her name, her body was found trampled by a carriage a few days after she arrived in St. Louis. An autopsy found that she was 5 months pregnant and had suffered a blow to the head. The St. Louis papers were filled with the investigation, but her murder remains a cold case. Ben Veith moved from the City Hotel to take over the Madison in 1896. Kaiser's sons, who had grown up in the hotel, remained on staff. As a young man, Veith was a brickmaker under B.H. Pohl and then a cooper for the Dooley Mills. Then he was a bartender at the Monroe House before partnering with Chris Miller to open a liquor store. Then they bought the City Hotel. Veith made lots of improvements, like enlarging the lobby and making the entrance more magnificent. When the exterior steps to the entrance on Madison were excavated and replaced with interior steps, the workers found charred, rough timbers that they suspected were left over from the Schmidt House. In 1905, the city's first elevator was installed. The downside was the other 14,000 residents lost power every time the elevator operated. Veith also added one of the city's first electric cash registers and one of the first refrigerators. In 1913, another floor was added to the hotel, and the basement became a cabaret called the Rathskeller. Despite live music nightly, the venture closed after only 4 years due to a lack of patronage. Billy Smith took over management in 1919. He was always accompanied by his bulldog, Booty, who was known to deliver newspapers to his regular guests. With the Volstead Act in place, changes were made. The dining room became a dance hall, the saloon became a lunch counter, and the old Rathskeller basement was given to the new American Legion post as a clubroom. A couple of Kansas Cityans leased the hotel. A yellow stucco exterior and an electric sign were added. The basement became Turkish baths, a gymnasium, a photographer's studio, dry cleaning, and a barbershop. With the end of Prohibition in 1933, the basement again became the Rathskeller. It was one of the first places in Jefferson City with air conditioning. Fire gutted the 70-year-old building in 1939. It was replaced in 1942 by the hotel governor. William Mousehound opened the Mousehound Saloon at the northwest corner of High and Monroe Streets in 1867. 6 years later, he added a hotel called the Monroe House. And 2 years after that, he added a restaurant. A caterer and bartender by trade, Mousehound created one of the most popular gathering places in Jefferson City. He died in 1879 after he was injured in a sleigh ride and doctors accidentally gave him too much chloroform. George Wagner took over the Monroe House in 1877. George and his brother Chris inherited their father's brewery in 1871, and by 1878, the city brewery on Dunklin Street was the largest in the state except for St. Louis's Anheuser Company. George's son, Billy Wagner, operated the Monroe House for the next 25 years. George was Cole County Sheriff, and then Billy followed after that. During Billy Wagner's tenure as both sheriff and operator of the Monroe House, the first case of a safe blowing in Jefferson City happened in his own saloon. The newspaper called it the boldest burglary ever. It happened at 1 a.m. when Wagner was away, the saloon was closed, and the porter was waiting for trains arriving at the depot. The next day, the culprits blew up a safe in Tipton, but they were never caught that I could find. Billy Wagner often was the first in town to add the latest convenience to make his hotel comfortable, like sewers, running water, electricity, and a guest call system. In 1884, a story and a half was added to the original building, and a 3-story, 75-feet addition was added along Monroe Street. Wagner was involved in many of the fledgling community betterment clubs of the day. Some of these had their beginnings in the Monroe House parlors, including the Capital City Bicycle Club and the Jefferson City Commercial Club. Like the Hotel Madison, the Monroe House formerly was owned by James Houchin, who fell into financial straits, and then was transferred to Houchin's daughter, Myrene, in 1919. Myrene's husband, Jack Hobbs, closed the hotel and renovated the building for office space in 1926. The late Nick Monaco restored this lovely piece of Jefferson City history. My fascination with Jefferson City hotels goes back to our founding as a capital city. Without the men and women who risked bankruptcy and built the hotels to satisfy the General Assembly, the capital might have moved elsewhere long before Sedalia was even founded. These were the iconic landmarks and the social centers for previous generations of Jefferson Citians. It's been fun to get to know the people and places and the stories that go with them. Now, if I may, real quick, I'd also like to tell you about my next new book that releases in February. First to Freedom, Cole County U.S. Colored Troops has been 10 years in the making. I'm very excited about this book. The local America 250 committee has planned a Black History celebration Thursday, February 5th at Lincoln's Poly Theater, where the book will be available for the first time to the public.